Hey folks, thanks for coming along. We're going to give everyone a couple of minutes just to arrive, and then we'll get started. Okay, we'll let the slow coaches get here when they get here. So we'll get started in the meantime. I appreciate everyone that's come in, putting aside some time for a look at what we're up to on the AppNet side of things. This is our first webinar for the year. And basically what we want to do here is just go through some of the features that we've shipped in recent months, sort of the headline features. As some of you know who've been customers for a while, we're in a case of constant evolution with the platform. So we're always sort of shipping new things. Obviously, some things are larger than others, and that's what we'll be looking at today is some of the larger features. Aside from this, we'll also be just at the end of the session, we're going to just sort of look at a few things that we're working on at the moment that we'll be hopefully bringing out in a time frame of around about May. So we'll look at a few of those headline things as well. If you've got questions, really happy to answer those. What I would suggest you do is type your question up in the chat area of the Zoom meeting. And then at the end of the session, I'll pull up those questions and I'll go through them and answer them as best as I can. So yeah, if you've got questions, please just pop those into the chat and we'll definitely get to them at the end. If we run out of time, I'll be able to take those up with you offline as well. So again, thanks very much for coming and let's get into it. So just a quick disclaimer is a lot of these features that we're going to look at today are not available to customers who are on grandfathered plans. Basically, anybody who was on a customer prior to the turn of 2017, they were on a grandfathered plan. They've been able to upgrade if they need to. So all our features since 2017 really have not been available to grandfathered customers. So if you are one of those grandfathered customers in today and you're seeing the stuff I'm showing you and you're not seeing it in your account, the most likely reason is because you're grandfathered. So if you'd like to give those things a go, have a try with them. Hopefully we can tempt you into upgrading up to our current plans. Just get in touch with us. We'll have some support and customer success team links at the end of this session as well. All right, so I think the first thing to get into, and we did talk about this in our last webinar as well, is the REST field that we shipped. I think the REST field has kind of gone under the radar for some people. And what we're going to do is look at a few other scenarios that you can do with the REST field today. And these are just examples, but hopefully conceptually you'll see that there's a lot of opportunity with it. Fundamentally, I still think the REST field is probably, out of all the things we shipped, and we only shipped this right at the end of last year, this is probably, I think, one of the most transformational fields that we've shipped kind of ever with the app side of things, at least. And that's purely just because it is designed to be like a Swiss Army knife of API goodness, basically. So the idea is you can use this field to go and make a request from an external API while you're in the app in the middle of a form, and you can get the response back, and then you can do things with the response information. So it just opens up so many different possibilities. It is a more technical field. So obviously, if you're not if APIs, you don't even know what those mean, hey, this is probably going to be a little bit over your head, but definitely have a look at it, hopefully appreciate the functionality you might be able to achieve with it. And we can definitely help you in terms of getting up and running with this field as well. So yeah, let's take a quick look. We've got a couple of examples we're going to look at for the REST stuff. The first one, this is actually in our examples catalog. So if you head over to the app here and you go to the examples catalog and you search for, if you just search for REST, you'll probably find this. This is something you can install into your own account and have a look at how this has been done. You can see there's some instructions on how to get an API key and that sort of stuff. Essentially, the idea with this little example is that we're going to call out to a service, an external service that provides weather information. We're going to receive that information back into the app, and then we're going to use that information to display bits and pieces of that into various fields inside the app. So just looking at the design really quick, we've got the REST request that we're going to make out. And you can see we're doing it dynamically. So we're building up this REST URL that we're going to call to. We're doing it dynamically within the app, where we've got an API key that we have to provide to the service. Otherwise, they'll tell us to get lost because they don't know who we are. And then we've also got the actual country of choice that we're asking for some weather for. So that's kind of the short end of it. Obviously, there's a little bit more detail to this, and any API that you're going to plug into your form, you'll want to go and look at their documentation to understand how that works. And then after that, you can test out and try it out. So this is the REST field here, and that's kind of the crux of this entire form. Everything is going to happen through this field. The basic idea is that the user is going to pick a country first. So we've got some just hard-coded countries here, and they're going to select that from this sort of choice list here. When they choose that, we are going to trigger a call to the REST API that we want to get the data from. So you can see here in the config of the REST field, we've done a couple of things. First thing we've got is we've set the request trigger to happen based on a condition. And so the condition is essentially when this country choices field has got a value selected. So the moment they actually pick a value, that is the REST field's trigger to go and make that request and receive the data back. And we're going to get it back as JSON. In this case, we also support XML if you're working with XML APIs. There's a few other customizations you can do with the REST field. At the end of the day, it's kind of simple. It's really just all about this area up here. But you can also customize the message to kind of give the user better information while they wait for the REST request to process. So that's kind of the how we're going to actually get the data, trigger the data off, receive it back. Once we have the data back, all of the response from this API lands up inside this REST field as essentially like an answer for that REST field. So it'll have the entire JSON body within it. That's in of itself is not particularly useful. So what you'll want to do is then extract information from that API. So if I go over here and I have a look at, say, just how we set up some of these fields, the key thing here is we've hooked up dynamic values, which is essentially we're going to assign values into this field. And we're doing it by extracting a value from the JSON in the REST field. And we're using something called JSON path to sort of map out how we're going to get that. So the body of the information that comes back from the API is going to be, sort of the full JSON format. We'll be able to then sort of explore that and pull out the things that we want. So we're using the JSON val formula function to do that. We have an equivalent XML val formula function as well. So yeah, I mean, that's the sort of crux of how this works. There is obviously a little bit more to it. And as I said, this is a more technical field. If you're wondering about how to extract information from JSON or from XML, in our support documents and our formula cheat sheet, you can go and see some data about how to do that there. And we've got links to JSON path and how to test things and that sort of stuff as well. You'll notice we also support the idea of returning a list of information as well. So let's say, if we're calling into that weather service and we're calling it for multiple countries, and it was sending us back an array or a list of country data, well, we can interrogate those lists using the JSON list or the XML list if it was XML. So that's another way of being able to access information. Really, between these two formula functions, you can do a lot of things with JSON responses or XML responses. So these are formula functions that if you're in that kind of game where you want to be plugging into APIs and that sort of stuff, these are extremely useful formulas to know about and have a bit of a practice with. Let's just have a look at how that works with the actual app itself. So we've got our little REST example down here. Now this is live demoing, which means it's probably going to break, but let's see how we go. So let's see what the weather's like in Australia. And you can see it's pulled it back. It's worked, which is great. I haven't been cursed by the live demo gods. And you can see we've got some information about that, sort of current temperature and that sort of thing. If I picked a different one, then it's going to refresh, and it's now pulling back the weather for that area as well. So again, a really simple example, but hopefully gives you a little bit of the building blocks in terms of how to use this field. So I think we might have showed some of this in our last webinar. We're going to show you a kind of different case now, which I think is also just kind of demonstrates the flexibility of what you can do with the REST field. And that's this idea that if I'm in the middle of a form capture, hey, maybe I want to create a task in App-Inate as a result of that form capture or during that form capture. So we've got a form here that we've created, and you can see it's got a bunch of data just sort of defaulting into it. If we kind of head over just to kind of see what we're going to get up to here, the basic idea is that we're going to use our own App-Inate API to create a task. So we have this post task thing on our API Explorer, which you can go check out, and you can see it's got a whole ton of stuff that you can do in terms of what you can populate into the task. But probably more interesting is just having a look at how we've achieved this within the actual form. So we've got our task form down here, and it's pre-populating a bunch of stuff, but the user could be entering that if they wanted to. We've got a drop down here which lets you pick which form you want to send out as a task. So you could put more forms in here if you wanted and that sort of thing. You got to pick who the user is that's going to get assigned that task, and then we just have a create button here which you can press. And once you press that, down the bottom here is a little task creation sort of thing here, and you can see that's our API. That's the App-Inate API that we're going to post into. We're creating a dynamic body here because, well, we're creating this task on the fly through the API. So we're just going to push them a form. We're not doing any preset answers, but you could preset answers into the form as well if you wanted and that sort of stuff. So that's possible with this approach as well. And you can see we're just sort of creating a very basic bare bones task with this sort of approach. So let's have a look at how that works. If I just head out of here real quick. I've got 3 tasks currently, so we'll see if this works. Again, live demo gods pulling. This will work out. So go to the John. Anybody excited for Game of Thrones coming back? Well, we're with you on that. Should be good. So the user's been selected. We've picked the form that we want to attach on that particular task. We've got some other information here, and I mean, I could edit this if I wanted to and change it out. And we're going to create that. So we sent that as like a receiving data message. We should have probably said, creating task or something. You can see the result here was that the task was created. That is something slightly new that we added just in the last couple of months, is we're also returning the status that we get back from the web service. So if you are calling a web service and it gives an error, it'll usually give an error code and an error message. Previously, you weren't really able to get that. For us, it was either the API said it was okay, or it said it was not okay. And if it was not okay, there was like no extra information that you could get from that response. So we've changed that up a little bit. We have a new HTTP status formula function that we added in our last release, which allows you to extract that status out. And you can see, that's how we're sort of determining if the task was okay or not. And you could extract more from the information of the REST request as well. Let's come back. So yeah, let's have a look if that's actually worked or if we're just kidding ourselves here. If I just do a quick sync, and obviously, this would happen normally in the background and that sort of thing. We can see we've got the task update that's come through. There it is there. And I think this would be my new one over here. So we've got, as you can see, we've got these sort of things rolling through pretty nicely. That's just another example, again, of how you can use the REST field to interact with services, even our own web services, to do some cool stuff. So yeah, that's the task example that we had for you. And I hope that kind of just opens up your eyes a little bit to the possibilities of the REST field. I mean, again, to me, it's just, once you kind of get your head into this stuff, it really opens up the possibilities to do so many different things. So from like an enterprise perspective, particularly, where in the enterprise software space, everything is moving to APIs, and generally REST APIs. It used to be SOAP, 10 years ago. Now it's REST APIs is the new thing. Well, it's actually always been the thing, but it's the thing that you hear about a lot from a lot of enterprise vendors and so on. the fact that you can now consume those services or interact with those services right there from the apps that you're building, I think is just super powerful. So yeah, we're really keen to see what you guys do with this field. If you're doing something cool with this, or you're stuck and you've got no idea how to do things, get in touch with us. We'd love to see what you're doing. We'd love to help you get those things working. There are a few rough edges to the REST field right now that we're already working on, that we've had feedback on. Probably the biggest thing with the REST field right now is that there is no way to set headers on the request. So if you need to send like an authentication token or something like that as a header on the REST API request, you can't do that right now. The good news is you will be able to do that when we release our current cycle that we're on. So our current development cycle just started. We're hoping that we'll be able to ship that in May. So hopefully by sometime in May, you'll be able to send headers and things like that too. So I think that'll close the loop, and that's probably the most glaringly obvious thing that we don't have capability for right now. Yeah, so I think that's where we can probably put a pin in the REST side of things. I will, I think, just carry on trucking, and hopefully, if you've got questions and things occurring to you, just write them down in the chat, and we'll definitely come back to those. So yeah, don't forget them. We'd love to know what you want to know, and then we can help you out with that. So let's move on. Probably something that I think was key that we shipped in January, February timeframe is the SQL connectors. SQL Server, well, the ability to connect to SQL Server has been something that we've been able to do for a long time. We've been able to do it with a product that we have called App Innate Sync. And that's something that I think is still really pertinent and useful when you have an on-premise SQL Server that you don't want to expose to the internet. Our sort of default position right up until probably about 6 months ago was use App Innate Sync because it's going to keep your database safe, right? Because App Innate Sync is what you would put in between your firewall and your database, and it's going to take care of a lot of the security concerns that you would probably have with exposing your database to the internet. If I'm honest, I still have the same concerns about exposing a SQL database in. And I think, I guess in my very distant past, I did database administration and things like that, and it was just like a kind of cardinal sin to expose your database any more than you needed to. That said, and the reason that we've eventually come around to the SQL connections thing is if you're working within the Azure world or you're working within the Amazon AWS world and that sort of stuff, there is a lot of security that those platforms are providing now, just layers that are helpful to keeping your database a little safer. If you're running on Azure particularly, what is kind of good about that is you can tick boxes inside the setups. If you set up an Azure database, like a SQL Server database in Azure, what is kind of good about that is you can sort of say, okay, we'll only accept connections from inside Azure. So don't accept connections from outside. And obviously, since the App Innate platform runs on the Azure cloud, we're kind of doing an in-house connection as opposed to a, kind of going out to the wild west of the internet and, connecting in that sort of space. So I guess, our thinking's probably evolved a little bit on that. And it's never been the case that we couldn't do a SQL connector. It was more a case of we thought it was a bad idea. Do we still think it's a bad idea? I think in certain contexts, you should still definitely use Sync, because Sync is going to give you all that security. The sort of trade-off with that is that Sync needs to be installed. It needs to run its own server. You've got to set all of that stuff up. That might be beyond your capability, or it might just be something that you don't want to get up to doing or maintaining. And, that's fair enough. That is the trade-off that comes with Sync. So if Sync is really just for those reasons or others not really on the table for you, well, our SQL connectors are there. You can use them. They're baked into the platform, and they run just like any other connector. So let's take a quick look at those guys and just sort of go through them real quick. So the first thing you want to do is under the connections area. Now I'm probably just jumping around a little bit in terms of what I was going to do here, but in the connections area, you can go and add a SQL connection. That's where they are there. The SQL Server connection, just so you know, is a premium connector. A lot of people have been asking us, what are these premium connectors you guys talk about? Like, we don't see like hardly any of them. Well, the answer is they're coming, and here's another one of them that's shown up. I think the SharePoint list being able to do connectors with SharePoint list is also a premium feature as well. When we call a connector premium, what we mean by that is that any submission, whether it's a form entry submission or a data source or anything like that, can only be seen or interacted with by premium type users in the platform. So if you have standard users in your setup, you will not be able to use the SQL Server connection. We'll probably let you add it, but we're going to tell you that this is not going to work within the software. If you're a user in the field and you're a standard user and you submit an entry, we'll accept the entry, we'll save it, we'll store it. If you have a SQL connector on that form, it is not going to work for that user's submission because they are a standard user. So maybe it's a little complex, but that's kind of how we decided to do it. We didn't want to charge you more for a SQL Server connection if you're already on premium. And obviously, we want to give you a good reason to move to having premium users as well. So that's why SQL Server is a premium connector. More than likely, we're going to be adding more database sort of driven connectors in the future, and those will more than likely be premium connectors as well. So just a heads up on that. Cool. So the beta tags are all over the place right now. Those will be taken off next week. So really, as it stands right now, we're pretty confident that it's at a production level. We've had some bugs and stuff like that we've been fixing over the last few weeks. So that's kind of cleaned things up a bit, and that's why we have a beta tag in the first place. So yeah, these tags will go off. If you ask me, can I use this in production right now? I would say, yeah, go for it, because these tags really are purely cosmetic at this stage. They are coming off very soon. Cool. Just while I'm here as well, we also added the ability to have multiple connections of the same type. This is something you previously could not do. So previously, you could not have a connection to one SQL database and a connection to another one, or one connection to Google and then a completely separate connection to Google to a different Google account. You could not do that previously. We only supported one connection of a specific type. We've changed that now. You can have as many connections to different sources of the same type as you like. You can also clone connections now. So, if you just want to make a quick copy and then just change the user that you're connecting with or whatever, you can totally do that. So that was it's such a small thing. And a lot of people were like, this is totally obvious. Why don't you do this? For us, it was like architecturally a real pain in the ass to do. So very glad we got it done. We're very glad we saw the back of this feature because it involved a lot of change across really a bunch of core areas. So for us, it was risky to do, but I think it is just something that naturally we probably should have had from the start. Hindsight's 2020 and all that. So yeah, so you can now add as many connections you like. You can go crazy with them. If you go crazy with them, let us know, because we'd like to see what exactly you did with them, just so we can see the level of crazy we're dealing with here. That would be helpful from a design perspective. Anyway, so that's how you set up your SQL connection. And so this is basically now allowing our platform to get into your database and do the things it needs to do when you hook up connectors in turn. There is a note here, and I'll just highlight it. Like, there's a few things with connecting to a SQL database. It can be a bit difficult. The first thing is almost always there's a firewall somewhere that is going to prevent our platform from connecting into your database. You need to add our platform IP addresses to your firewalls if that's the case, and that'll probably be the case. Our IP addresses are in our support area. If you go to support.appnet.com, you can go search for our IP addresses there and add them into your firewalls. If you don't do that, we're not going to be able to connect. You're going to have a big red cross here, and things will be sad until you get that working. So yeah, that's probably the one thing to really bear in mind. We also don't support Windows authentication into SQL Server, which is kind of obvious because we wouldn't be part of your Windows domain or anything like that. But yeah, you need to use like the SQL Server username password authentication to plug in to the database. So yeah, that's just a quick thing on that, and that's probably where you're going to get bogged down if you're stuck. You can see we've put a bit of detail in here as well about what kind of roles the SQL user has to have, because we need to be able to do a few things in that database. We need to be able to create tables. We need to be able to insert rows. We need to be able to delete rows, update things, that sort of stuff. That's what our connectors are going to do for you. If we have a look at just kind of a few things where we're using the SQL connector, this is a data source here. This is using a SQL Server connector to pull data out of a database table in SQL Server and populate it into our system, and thus make it available to the apps. So just to kind of clarify as well, our connector is going to go visit your database, in this case on a 15-minute interval. It's going to go pull the rows across, and we're going to store those rows in our system and then sync them down to the devices. So each app is not going to, or each app user is not going to connect directly to your database. That would be really terribly bad from a security perspective, and that's why we don't do it, because having an unknown quantity of unknown devices connecting to your database from a bunch of unknown IP addresses, that's the stuff of database administrator nightmares. So we don't do that. We will probably never do that. In fact, if we do, something massive must have changed in our mindset for that to happen. So we're going to store we're going to store those rows that we get. We can do it in a secure, relatively secure manner with IP address firewalls and stuff like that. So that's what's going to pull that back, and we've got the rows pulling back here and being refreshed and that sort of stuff. And I can just sort of show you really quick what that looks like as well in SQL Server. So this is me connected to my SQL Server database. This is an Azure, just an Azure SQL database that we run up for the purpose of this test. There's my rows and columns, pretty basic stuff, and that's all being pulled back, into our product list on the other side. So yeah, really nice and simple. I think that's one of the things I like most about these connectors. Is whereas sync is a bit of work to kind of set up and install and that sort of stuff, can be a bit of a pain. SQL connector stuff is just a lot simpler and quicker to set up. So that is a major plus with the SQL connectors versus our sync option. The other thing we've done with this is we've set up a SQL connector, a couple of SQL connectors actually, on a form in this field sales example, which are going to create rows into database tables on that side. We've got a couple of tables that we're adding rows to here. And at the moment, we've got this auto maintain option turned on, which is the default. What that means is that our connector here, our form connector, is going to create the table if it doesn't exist. It's going to maintain that table. So between versions of your form, if you're adding fields, removing fields, doing stuff to the design, which essentially affects the columns of the table, the database table, we're going to take care of that. So we're going to pick that up, realize, oh, the version's changed, oh, this column doesn't exist, or this new column has to be added. It all just happens, right? That's just a natural part of it. That's something we've brought over from Sync. Sync has the same capability, and so we've brought that into the SQL connectors. And basically, if you're setting up a SQL connector right now, our advice would be use the auto maintain option, right? If you have, your way around SQL and you're feeling particularly wild, you can untick this box, and then we give you the option to pretty much write whatever SQL you like against your database, which is kind of as scary as it sounds, but I could say, well, insert into some table, column 1, values, pull a value out of my form, right? Whatever I wanted to do, I guess. Let's pull company contact, and I could stick that into a table, right? When you untick the box, you are essentially saying to our connector, I know what I'm doing, leave me alone, I'm going to take care of all of this. So we're not going to maintain this table that you're inserting into. We are not going to check that it even exists. You've got to make sure all of those things are in place. But at the same time, you can do some really crazy stuff with this. So we really debated about whether we even wanted to give people this option, because we have a feeling that some people are going to do some just crazy, insane stuff. What kind of got us over the line on this is that at the end of the day, it's your database that you're connecting to. So if you destroy your database, well, that's on you. Sorry, that sounds a bit callous, but it pretty much is. So we're going to give you the reins, and we're going to say you can do whatever you like. We'll give you as much rope as you need to hang yourself if that's what you want to do. So I'm kind of talking down this option, and it's just because we think it's something that could be, really powerful, but also really, really dangerous. So if you know what you're doing, this could be really, really powerful for you. The other thing I'll just also note on this is that our connectors are set up to run with a 10-second timeout. So what that means is your database needs to be able to process whatever we're sending you from that connector request and respond within 10 seconds. If it doesn't, we're going to treat it as a fail, and we'll try again later and that sort of stuff. But essentially, your database needs to be fast enough to process that. And also, if you're doing custom SQL, you can't write reams of stuff in here. It's got to be fairly straightforward and simple, so it'll execute fast enough. Yeah. So just a note on that. If you don't want to take a walk on the wild side, just tick the auto maintain box. You will get a magic table created magically in your database, and rainbows and unicorns and all that. So yeah, that's how those connectors are set up there. Let's just do a really quick test of just how this should work. And again, we're doing live testing, so this is usually never easy to have work perfectly first time. We'll get an apricot bar for 99, and we'll add another. Let's get some chocolate. Not a Cliff Bar. Let's get light. We'll make that a heck of a lot more, because who doesn't like a lot of chocolate? Just go through this and kind of finish it up. And upload it. So that's going to get uploaded. If I've done things correctly, we're going to end up with that popping into my data feed over here. Cool, so that's come up. If I go look at my connector logs, I can see that our SQL Server connector is already run, and so that's added rows to this. And if I pop into my SQL database, this is what we had previously. Hopefully, if I execute this again, we've got a few more rows to deal with. There we go. So that was the new entry that I just did. It's come in. Oh no, sorry, that would be it over here. Yep, that's it. So yeah, there's our new entries come in. We've actually got two different tables here just in this example, because we wanted to show how repeats can be handled differently. So if you're capturing repeatable information, like I just captured there, I captured 2 product lines, so I had repeatable data in my form entry. The one option is you can say that you don't want to, you want to populate every single row with all the data all the time, which is what's happening here. Or you can say, look, only populate the first line and then leave the other ones to be null, and only sort of populate on those other lines where there's actually repeatable data. So you can see here, there's our product information coming through. That's always populated because that's the purpose of the repeat. But all the stuff that was done like a one-time story inside the form has just been updated or set into the first row. So that's up to you. It depends on what kind of data ingestion you need to do. Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to pause there for a sec because we've got a few other things that we can talk about. But I thought we'll have a look at some questions now, just sort of see what we've got to deal with. So I'll just drop my share, and should be able to get out of that. Okay. There we go. Got there eventually. Cool. So I'm just going to have a look at these quick chats here. All right. Yeah, thanks for agreeing with me that I'm not crazy about exposing a database. That is good to hear. I'm not the only one. Just having a quick look. Yeah, you could totally set up a database in a separate DMZ and only allow data from Apinate and so on. So that's another way you can do it. Yeah, in terms of database connectors, just having a look here, I can see Rob said, we're going to do Oracle and things like that. Yes, the plan is to get to Oracle at some point, so it's definitely on the list. Postgres is another one that I'm particularly interested in, just because I like Postgres. So we'll do that as well at some point. All right, cool. So not a ton of questions, just some comments. So thanks for that. I definitely appreciate you guys telling me I'm not crazy about the database security thing. As I said, it did take a bit of convincing for me to get to that one. Yeah. All right, so just another question here. With the SQL Server Connector, can rows be created or updated using form screens? So in other words, like two-way. No. Currently, the SQL Server Connector for data sources works exactly the same way as all our other data source connectors, which means it is a one-way connector. What we mean by that is we will pull rows from the external source and we'll treat the external source as the source of truth. And so we don't push changes to that data source back to it. That said, what you can do is you can use the same table as a data source as well as a target for a form connector. So your form connector could be pushing rows across to that table, and populating that table, and then you could be ingesting that very same table as a data source through a data source connector. So you've got a kind of circular loop going on there. So it's not using the bind to data source column stuff that we support in terms of like internal data source updates that you can do with forms. What that's about is really we're pushing the rows out to the SQL Server table and then pulling them back in through a separate connector on the data source side. Just on the form connector really quick as well, we have plans to allow you with the auto maintain option to specify which form fields you want to actually populate into the table. Right now it's a kitchen sink, which means every single field in the form gets a column in the database table pretty much. So you end up with the entire form's worth of data across there. The plan that we have is to add the ability to do like a field mapping essentially. So you can say, well, these are all the fields in my form. I only actually want to send these ones, like maybe it's only 5 or 6 out of the 200 you have. So that way your tables will be much lighter, the SQL connectors run faster, all that sort of stuff. So that's definitely coming. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, since we don't have a ton of questions, I'm going to keep motoring on because I'm really mindful of your time and don't want to keep you here any longer than you need to be. Just got a few other things to look at, and then we'll talk about what we're doing next. In this sort of March, May sort of cycle that we're in. So I'll just start my share up again, and we will crack into it. All right. I'll just do that. I'm not sure what that's going to do. Okay. So just in terms of other things that we've shipped in the last few months, we shipped the ability to do single sign-on with the app through Okta last year, and that's worked out pretty well. Okta is a very well-known enterprise identity service used by big companies to kind of have a single login across a lot of applications. So we've sort of joined that crowd of applications that you can support through Okta. We've now since shipped support for Azure Active Directory and also support for Ping Identity. Microsoft Azure Active Directory is kind of their direction for Active Directory. Anybody who's in that sort of space would have heard Microsoft. It's pretty much all they talk about. As far as they're concerned, it seems like Active Directory on premise, where you run Active Directory on your own servers. That's kind of, I think that has a end of life attached to it, really. And for Microsoft, everything's about Azure going forward. So we thought we looked at supporting on-premise Active Directory. A lot of security concerns there, similar to the SQL side. We may circle back to that and add a plugin to sync at some point down the track to support on-premise Active Directory. Right now, it's not sort of a high priority. So we've gone with Azure Active Directory as our kind of focus for that. And the reason mainly being just because it has a much cleaner API, it's more secure, all those sorts of things. And also it just seems to be the future direction that Microsoft's pushing everybody into. Yeah, so in terms of how you set up single sign-on, that sort of stuff, the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need the Enterprise Toolkit, which is an add-on option. It's an extra cost. But for the costs, you get a ton of features out of it. And it's really only useful, I think, for enterprises. That's why we call it the Enterprise Toolkit. So if you're a smaller company and so on, you're not using single sign-on or anything like that, you don't need the Enterprise Toolkit. And yeah, don't go buy it. But if you are a larger organization, you've got maybe branches that you want to keep more separate and set up the separate almost organizations, or you want to set up a development and testing environment, that sort of thing, all under your same account umbrella on the AppNet platform. the enterprise toolkit is exactly what you need. That thing's going to open up all those possibilities and also unlock these sort of single sign-on cases as well. So you can give that a try. There's a free trial option for it if you haven't tried it before. You can do a 30-day trial of it, just sort of see what it's about, and just head over to our billing page to do that and find it down in the add-ons. Once you've got that turned on, there's this external provisioning sort of deal, and maybe I'll try and move this out the way. There we go. So this is where you'd go. You head into this connector option here, and then you can basically turn on any one of these. So Azure Active Directory is there, and you can sort of add it in here, and you can then fill out all the details. There is some detail to setting this up. It's not just plug in a connection and it's good to go. Because of the security stuff and all the other things, there is something to this. So you've got to kind of read through it. We have a pretty comprehensive support article in our support site that talks about how to set this up. It's not super difficult. You just got to follow the steps and kind of go through it and get it all set up. The one thing I would definitely highly or strongly recommend is if you're going to try this out, don't add it onto your main production account. The reason being because it's going to start thinking you want to sign on through Azure, once you've set up the initial configuration. And if you've got that config wrong, you're going to lock yourself or your users out of the app. The whole point of the Enterprise Toolkit, or originally, and now it's grown in scope, is that it gives you the ability to have this little tab at the top where you can set up more environments underneath you. So you can set up and have multiple environments and that sort of stuff. So what we would really strongly recommend is you have the toolkit installed, you go and set up like a development environment, which has just got you in it. It's it's a completely separate organization. So it's completely siloed away from your production environment. You're not going to do anything to that. While you're in that environment, go play with the single sign-on stuff. Give it a try, break it, lock yourself out, all those things. You'll be able to get back in because you'll be an administrator on the entire Enterprise Toolkit account. So you'll be able to get in there and fix that up and remove the connector or whatever you need to do. So yeah, please do that because we'll help you and we'll take the connector off for you from a support perspective, but we just don't want you to disrupt your guys in the field particularly. So yeah, make use of the toolkit when you're testing out the these sort of enterprise options. Cool. Azure Active Directory is the one that so far we've got full support for. It's not just single sign-on, it's also user provisioning. So what we mean by that is you can set up users in your Active Directory, you can flag them on to have access to Apponate, and they will actually be automatically provisioned into the Apponate as users. So the users will actually wind up in the user setup here, and they're essentially being maintained from Azure Active Directory instead. So that's kind of cool in the sense that you don't have to do duplicate maintenance of users and that sort of stuff. Similarly, if you remove the Apponate sort of rights or you delete them out of Active Directory, that will synchronize into our platform and they'll disappear off our platform as well. So yeah, it kind of centralizes your user management. That's the whole point of an enterprise identity system, is that you manage all that sort of stuff in one place. And so we're totally on board with that. Not only do you get the sign-on, but you also get the provisioning as well. That is the case for Okta too, in case you weren't aware of that. So you can do single sign-on provisioning with Okta as well. With Ping, what to say about Ping? Ping is a very special organization. We've had a lot of difficulty kind of engaging with them. Yeah, from a development perspective, Azure Active Directory and Okta were a piece of cake, really. Obviously there's lots of technical challenges, but just documentation and access to people who help us and that sort of stuff was great. Ping has been the polar opposite of that, if I'm absolutely honest, which has been really disappointing because technically they seem to have the same sort of match of features and so on that we need to plug into as Okta and Azure. So where we're at with Ping right now is we've got single sign-on solved and working. We don't have provisioning working, which is super frustrating because they seem to have implemented all the standard stuff we expect them to have. We just flat out cannot get them to help us to get it to work. So we are trying, we're going to keep working on that. We'll break through eventually. I'm not sure. At this point, I may well fly over to their headquarters and throw a brick through their window because maybe that'll get their attention. But you know, and I'm not bitter at all. But that's where we're at with them. It's been very surprising dealing with them for such a big organization. We thought they would be far more, I guess, developer oriented. Anyway, so we will get that done. We will get there. That is our personal saga that we'll go through, but we will get there. So at the moment, if you want to use ping, single sign-on's fine. You'll be able to use that. Provisioning, I'm afraid you've still got to set up the users in our platform manually because we cannot at the moment just get them to help us to connect the dots on how to pull that across. So yeah, cool. That's single sign-on. We've done a bunch of other things, and I'm mindful of where we're at in terms of time, so I'm just going to talk really quickly about those. The tasking side of things is it's an ongoing project for us. Where tasking is today, where it was even a year ago, it's moved a lot. We've added a lot of features, we've added a lot of functionality. We're continuing to do that. So pretty much tasking is a fixture on our release cycle for the foreseeable future. So every release cycle will have new tasking stuff that we're bringing through. And that's just because we're seeing more usage of it. We're hearing more about where it's lacking, and we're adding those features. So we're going to continue to work at that. I don't know when tasking will be, even feature complete. I don't think that's even going to exist because it's such a deep area, and we have so much more that we can do there. So we're just going to keep working at that. Last few months, we shipped a few things like a task map now where you can see where tasks are placed on a map. This is just an example of that. And you can do filtering and coloring. So you want to see it by like active users and so on. We're going to color code things differently based on the user or on status or, by the type of task that you've set up, that sort of thing. So this is just ongoing. The map dropped a month or two ago. We're going to keep working at this. The first to claim feature that we've talked about is like right on the cusp of shipping. It's just a few little things we've had to solve on that. That should hopefully ship next week. The ability to send out tasks to a group of people with all of them having to do that will come next, probably on a sort of 3-4 week lag on that one. But the first to claim is so close. It's going to be out next week, I think. So that'll be really cool. You can send a task out to a group of users or a selection of users, and the first one that claims it will then get the task. It's first and best dressed kind of concept. So yeah, we're excited about that. That's going to be in the product so soon. I wish we could have had it now so I could show you it because that's just a cool little feature that we wanted to do for a long time. So that's going to come along. We have a bunch of other things that we're going to be doing in that area. And I think that's as good a segue as I can get to kind of talk about what we're doing next. And that's where we're going to, sort of close up this webinar is looking at what we're doing next. So with the SQL connectors, that's kind of signaled the start of what we're focused on from a connector perspective, probably for the next sort of 6 months, I would say. We're focusing our connectors increasingly into enterprise applications. Mainly because we have a lot of customers who are asking us for those features. So, as we've done for the last 7 years, we go where the customer demand is in terms of the features. We're going to sort of herd the product down a vision that we have, but we're going to make sure that we're delivering the things that people want as opposed to what we think would be fun. One of the things we've heard a lot about is Power BI. So Power BI is Microsoft's business intelligence tool. It's a super impressive product. I know they've got a lot of people behind it, and it's got a lot of momentum as well. And so Power BI is a connector that we're building for forms right now. The idea with it is that you will be able to push data across to Power BI and then use that data obviously in your charting and reporting and that sort of stuff on the Power BI platform. So essentially we're building a form connector for Power BI right now. We're planning to ship that by May. And that will allow you to plug your Power BI account in as a connection and then, feed data into Power BI to do interesting things with it. Power BI is the first of several kind of reporting focused or BI focused platforms that we plan to build connectors for this year. We are also looking at building connectors for Clipfolio. Right now is probably the next one on the list that we really want to build a connector to. And most of these reporting ones are going to be form connectors only until we can figure out whether there's any value in having a data source or a task or whatever connector. So they'll just be form connectors for now. We'll see what people do with it and then go from there. But basically, we want to make it easier for you to connect into services that are very good at doing reporting or business intelligence. At this point, that's kind of our preferred direction for the reporting piece of what you might want to do with things you do in Apinate. Customers sometimes ask us, like, are you going to build reporting in the software itself? At this point, our focus is to build connectors to services that are way better at it than we are, because we don't want to give you a subpar experience in the platform when you could just plug into something that's amazing. And Power BI is super impressive. So that's the focus that we'll have, is try and build out some connectors to reporting services. So Clipfolio is the next one on the list, and then we'll see where we go from there. The other direction that we're going with connectors is SQL Connectors kind of has kicked off the start of really a bunch of database-focused connectors that we're going to do. And I guess, as I said before, we never really wanted to connect to databases because we thought there was a lot of security risks and so on. Well, the dam on that has broken, and so we are going to now put connectors to like every database we can think of. Well, no, we're going to be a little bit more selective than that. But the next one on the list for us is Google BigQuery. This is a shared project that we're doing with a customer who approached us and said, look, you had some good reasoning for why they want to do this. To be honest, we didn't know much about BigQuery when we were asked about it. So we went and looked into it, and it's actually a really great option that Google provides through their cloud service. Essentially, it's a NoSQL database that can do all kinds of amazing stuff. But what's really nice about it, and I think is a qualifying criteria for us, is that it supports SQL syntax. So just like SQL Server and Oracle and these other databases use the SQL language to write queries and extract and insert data into it, so does BigQuery, which is for us the key thing. So Google BigQuery is the connector that we will be shipping in the next few months. That's again on the list. After that, Oracle was mentioned. It's certainly on the list for us to look at. Postgres is another one we're looking at, and MySQL is another one. So those are probably the other three databases that we're really looking at in detail. We may also look at the AWS offerings that they have in that space as well, and build an AWS-based connector as well for what they've got. They've got DynamoDB and a few things there, so we'll look at those as well. So that's really where our connectors are focused this year, is reporting and databases. We'll probably build connectors to a few other things along the way, just as we get feedback and we can see momentum behind things. But yeah, in terms of the broad strokes, that's what we're up to as far as the connector stuff goes. Besides that, we have a bunch of other things that we're doing, and I'm going to give you a kind of look into this. This is Basecamp, which we use internally. So this is our release cycle to-do list here. This is going to get pared down. So I'm happy showing you this because some of these things are probably not going to make it into the overall cycle planning. But as you can see, we have a lot of stuff that's going on. I think it's like 100 and something items total that we've got included in here. So we've got a lot of other things going on. The tasking upgrades is the one that we're kind of working on right now, as far as just a list of things that we're doing. We've got some shared projects and stuff that we're doing around adding duration and complete time fields to task templates. We're going to add task templates into the repository and folders area because people are now building really quite detailed templates and they want to use it across multiple environments. So we're going to make that available in part of the repository so you can copy these things between your environments or your clients. Ability to reassign tasks is something that we're going to work on, using form fields in in task connectors. Yeah, just a bunch of stuff. So as I said, some of this stuff is going to get pared down, so I don't want to kind of oversell you on what we're going to do here because I think we will have to cut some of this just for time. But that hopefully gives you an idea of what we've got going on. Some of you keen observers may see the populate table field with data source is still there. We get questions on this all the time. I know it's probably the thing that people want the most. They could care less about whatever connector we're going to build next. They just want to be able to, I mean, you guys just want to be able to populate a table field in a form with rows from a data source. We get it. We hear you. We want to do it too. We've had 2 bites of this cherry, and the first one went pretty well until we hit a major blocker that just fundamentally we couldn't get past and had to rethink things. We had another crack at it late last year, try to come at it from a different direction, kind of hit the same point. And the blocker for us right now with this is performance, because we want you to be able to plug 50,000 rows into a table field and have that actually not crash the app. Like, that would be a good outcome. Or have it be performance, so you can use it and it's not taking 6 minutes to refresh the screen because there's just so much data going on in the background. That is our blocker right now, and we're working at it from a different direction now. We're just trying different approaches right now. We will solve it. I'm convinced of that. I have no idea when we will solve it though. So in terms of that delivery time frame, I think we made a mistake last year by saying, yeah, we can do this, because we were fairly far along and we thought, hey, this is good. We're in position here. This is going to work. And then we hit that blocker and completely unraveled the time frames that we've been promising for it. Suffice to say, it is on our release cycle for this current cycle. It is going to stay on our cycles until we solve it. All right. So I hope I will have good news for you in May when we do another webinar and we talk about things and I get to show you it. Like, that is my hope. I don't know if we will get there. So we're just going to keep working on it. It's a really tough nut to solve. Probably one of the most complex things we've had to solve kind of ever. We're just going to keep chipping away at it. We will find a way through this. So we'll get there. Yeah. That's it. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to take a look at some of your questions. But I mean, if you need to head off and that sort of stuff, hey, that's all good. Just really appreciate you guys coming in. So let's have a look at the chat here. We'll just stop the share as well. Okay, anybody else got any other questions here? So great, glad you guys are looking for it. Okay, Google single sign-on. Great question. I think we will get there. It is not high on the list right now because Okta and Ping will let you, like, they can be aggregators as well. So like you can actually collect, if you've got an on-premise Active Directory, obviously you can't use our Azure Active Directory for single sign-on with that, but you could actually connect your on-premise Active Directory to Okta and then use Okta to single sign-on with us. So these identity platforms can be like aggregators or intermediaries between other services. So you can, as far as I know, you can use Google single sign-on, or Google, the Google directory stuff with Okta, and then Okta is your point of single sign-on with us. So you can do that. It's not direct and it's not amazing, but it's possible. I think we'll get to Google single sign-on probably down the track though, as a direct connector. Web Focus, I have heard some things about Web Focus. I mean, honestly, the whole BI space is really interesting. There is so much stuff happening in it. I mean, yeah, Tableau is another one that someone's thrown out there. I mean, yeah, Tableau is one of the big guys in that space as well. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're gearing up to have like a death match with Power BI. So, we're watching that with interest as well. As I said, Clipfolio is the next one on the list for us. And that's primarily just because we know it. We think we can plug into it and get it done really quickly. But certainly these other sort of large BI tools that have been around for a long time or are newcomers to the space, what we're looking at is, the demand for those. We don't want to just go build connectors for the sake of building them. So if there are things that you would be interested in, let us know that you're interested in having those, or you could really use them. And we can talk about it. If it's something that we're not it's like not on our roadmap, you can talk to us about doing a shared project on that. So shared projects are where we will we'll take a project that we wouldn't have ordinarily done. We slipstream it along with our core development. We split the cost with you in terms of it. We do it every shared project we've done. It's not a revenue making exercise. It's really just a way to make sure that we have a commitment to actually do it and use it. And yeah, you can talk to us about that if that's super high on your list. Otherwise, just wait and see how we go with the connectors. But yeah, Tableau is probably the other one that we're already been thinking about and looking at in some sort of details. Cool. I don't see any other questions, so I think we can probably end things off there. If you do think of something or anything pops up, please get in touch with us. You can email customer@appanate.com, or you hit up our support team, support@appanate.com. End of the day, really appreciate you guys putting some time aside to come and listen to me drone on about all of this stuff. If you are stuck or you want some help with any of these new features, please also reach out. You know, we want to help you use them. We don't build these things for ourselves, we build them for you. So if you're having trouble using them, just come and find us and we'll help you. Yeah. Thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciate your time, and we will end things there. Have a great rest of your day.